Welcome to Writers on Writing. I am Donna Hill, and I am the guest host today. I'm very honored to be sitting in for Dr. Brenda Greene, who, as you know, is the Executive Director for the Center for Black Literature, the engine behind the National Black Writers Conference, and of course, your weekly host of Writers on Writing, in addition to her being a professor of English at Medgar College. So thank you all for joining us here today. But more than that, I am even more honored to be joined by my friend, my sister scribe, and sister in the struggle of literature, Miss Bernice McFadden. So, let me just tell you a little bit about Bernice before we even get started, because I could tell you all kinds of personal stories, but I won't. Um, Bernice L. McFadden is the author of numerous critically acclaimed books. I think we got up to 16, including Sugar, Loving Donovan, Nowhere is a Place, The Warmest December, Gathering of Waters, which was a New York Times editor's choice and one of 100 notable books of 2012. Glorious and the Book of Harlan, which is the winner of the 2017 American Book Award and the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work in Fiction. She is a four-time Houston Wright Legacy Award finalist, as well as the recipient of 4 awards from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. In addition to that, she is an essayist, short story writer, sister, daughter, caretaker, and assistant professor at Tulane University in Louisiana. So welcome, Bernice.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Donna. Thank you for having me
Sometimes
too.
when we hear about ourselves, you don't even realize some of the things, right?
Absolutely not. I just like, really, who's that? Who's she talking about?
So, of course, your career was launched with Sugar. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of like a fan favorite, Sugar. And you know from our conversations, as much as I love Sugar, one of the books that stand out for me is The Warmest December for a variety of reasons, the story, the craft, and the technical execution of it. Um, but the Book of Harlan is what we will be talking about today.
Hmm.
And on several levels, the Book of Harlan is being recognized this year, not only for the awards that it received, but because you'll be honored this year at the National Black Writers Conference, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But talk a little bit about, um, well, many of your novels um, take the reader on a journey,
Hmm.
as but figuratively as well as literally. And the Book of Harlan does the same thing. So can you just like talk a little bit about um, what your initial vision for the Book of Harlan was
Hmm.
and how you settled on where you would take it and why you made those decisions?
So I'm always gathering information. I'm a student of history and I love coming upon pieces that are scarce, like information that's scarce that a lot of people don't know about. So I
Mhm,
went to a book signing in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, Brownstone Books,
mhm,
probably back in 2008, possibly 2009. And the author, self-published author, a gentleman, and the title of the book was Germany's Black Holocaust.
mhm,
And so the title alone is what drew me in. And he spoke about these Black people who were in concentration camps in Germany
mhm,
during World War II. And I was like, why don't I know about this? And I kind of asked around. I may have asked you too. Have you ever heard?
Yeah, right.
Everybody's like,
No.
no, no, no. So I went down the rabbit hole of research because I knew that I wanted to write about this, but I had no idea how I would approach the subject. And it went on for years. So I had like a binder filled with information, still trying to figure out how am I going to write about this? I certainly didn't want to write about the war itself. I had no interest in the military. I started doing
Mhm.
some research. I was like, this is boring. I can't do this. And then one day, as you know, it always happens for me, this voice in my head said, well, just use your family tree. And
Oh.
I was like, I could totally do that. My grandfather, Harold McFadden, was born at the right time, 1917. And I had been working on his limb of the family tree for about 2 decades by then. And I had so much information. And so that's what I started. I just created this character named Harlan. And I
Robin.
said, I'm going to follow Harold's life. I'm going to obviously fictionalize some of it, layer it. Um, at the time, I had no idea where the story was going to end. Um, and I don't think that probably revealed itself until I came upon the character in the book, which she's called the bitch of Buchenwald. And I was
Mm,
like, oh,
right, right, right. Mhm.
okay. Now I know where we're going with this.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how that happened.
Okay. So, clearly you had to do, when you talk about, your research and how things sort of materialize for you. um, beyond because I think the thing that fascinated me about the Book of Harlan was, the whole idea of, Black folks in the concentration camps, so like, what were we doing there? Like, how we even get
Mhm.
there? But in your research, what are some of the other nuggets, that you came across that you discovered for the very first time for yourself? What were some of the things, that you found out?
Well, I found out there was really talented musician named Valeda Snow. And Valeda Snow, I mean, I think she played something like 16 instruments. This
Mm,
is during the Harlem Renaissance. I'm like, how come I don't know about her?
mhm,
And she herself was, I believe, in Denmark when she got scooped off the street by the Nazis, and she was placed in a concentration camp. She
oh,
remained there for a year. When they released her and she came back to America, she was sharing her story. And the white newspaper said she's lying. She was on drugs. They put her in jail. She was not in a concentration camp. And until she died, I mean, this ruined her, right? The trauma ruined her. But until the day she died, she said, no, this is where I was, this is what happened to me. So that's one thing that I learned. The other thing that I learned was about passing, not the passing that you and I are, and most Black folk are familiar with, but
mhm,
the passing of people. Well, we see it now, right, with the Kardashians, I think,
right,
of
yeah,
white people passing for Black, mostly musicians, because they loved the blues and jazz music so much that they felt they needed to completely embody a
mhm,
Black person in order to play the music authentically. So that was mind blowing because who in the world
good
would
thing.
want to be Black? I mean,
We do.
yes, we are right. We're so fly. But if you imagine at that time in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, it seemed unheard of. So that was quite surprising. Those are the two things that really jump out at me.
So talk about that character a little bit. Lizard, right?
Yes.
Yeah, talk
Yes.
about him a little bit.
So, I mean, I don't want to give too much away about Lizard, but he is he is Harlan's best friend. And Lizard actually grew up in Kansas, if I'm remembering correctly. And they meet in Harlem because Lizard is a trumpeter.
Mhm.
And they meet at a bar in Harlem and they become fast friends. They form a band, and that band ends up in Germany. I'm sorry, not in Germany, ends up in Paris, like right before everything pops off, and they get caught there. And
Mhm.
they both actually end up in one of the Holocaust camps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I want to, for the benefit of, those who have not read it like I have, I want to just kind of like backtrack just a little bit. So, um, talk about Harlan and who he was. And I mean, beyond being sort of, the literary embodiment of your grandfather, your great grandfather, who was Harlan? Who was he?
Harlan was the grandson of a
Mhm,
prominent minister in Macon, Georgia. The minister's name is the Reverend T.M. Robinson, and this is actually my double great paternal grandfather who was born into slavery and once emancipated, just really turned his life around. By the time he closed his eyes, he owned property, he had a newspaper. He's really a phenomenal human being. Anyway, so Harlan comes up in privilege, right? But
mm,
my grandfather had a daughter named Chapo, but in the book we call her Emma. And Emma was a musician as well.
mhm,
She left Harlan with her parents, and she and her husband traveled around the country because she just wanted to play music, but she just couldn't do it. For some reason, she would freeze up every time she went into a nightclub to play. She would freeze up, and she came from a religious family. So her husband said, "Well, maybe God don't want you to do this type
mhm,
of." So she taught children to play the piano. When she finally went to collect Harlan, he didn't know her. So it took a minute for them to forge a relationship, and she felt quite guilty about leaving him with her parents. And so she spoiled him, overindulged him, and at the age of 15, he decided he wasn't going back to school, that he was going to play music full time. He was a guitarist.
mhm.
Um, and so yeah, he was a bit of a bad boy and a miscreant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word for him. Definitely, that was a good word for him. So, um, in the book, it has so many themes. You have, the idea of, family and what that means. It doesn't always have to be by blood. You talk about, there's the whole idea of racism passing in a way that we have not experienced it or understood it before. Friendship and individualism, dreaming. So with all of these different threads running through the narrative, um, did these themes come about intentionally
Mm.
or organically as the story began to evolve? Did you say, okay, well, I want to make sure I have these things in my novel, or did they begin to emerge as you wrote?
It's always an organic process, right? And if there's anything missing, then my editor will point that out. But the story just unfolds just like my life. You meet people, they become your friends. You meet people, they become your family. You fall out with folk. This is just life. And that's how the stories always come to me. The characters are so alive in my mind, sometimes it's difficult to separate the reality of it all from fiction. So
Mhm.
no, I don't make a conscious decision to include certain themes.
Mhm. It just sort of happens. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so just in terms of, because readers of, of our work always wonder, how do they do that? You know,
Yeah.
how does that happen? Like, what is your process? So, your process and mine are clearly different. And so when you are thinking about a particular work or an idea, comes to you, talk about what that process is like for you. How do you
Mhm.
get from concept to page?
Often with my novels, it takes years. I'll be thinking about something while I'm writing a novel. Something will pop in my head and I'll just become hyper focused on it,
Mhm.
which is what happened with the Book of Harlan. And I'll think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it and start researching things that have to do whatever the subject is. And I'll do that until finally a door opens. It's like, here's the first line, right?
Mhm.
And then I can start. And that's how it is for me. I realize now, only because I'm teaching, that these things that have been the subjects of my previous novels all started with what we would call in class a prompt,
Mhm.
right? So we give our students prompts. Think about this and then write a story. And that's what I was doing in my writing life, not being aware of it. Like, this is actually a prompt.
Right, right.
Prompt is, suppose Black people were in the Holocaust. What would that story look like?
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, and the same thing, we do our you have your thesis, right? What is it that you wanna show?
Right,
And what am I going to prove to you throughout this narrative that this is what I was trying to get you to understand,
right,
right?
right, right.
So we have that. So when you talk about your research, and because there are so many factual historical things that have transpired, how do you go about interweaving the fictional aspects with the historical facts so
Mhm.
that you're not dumping information on people, because you don't want, whole page that explains the Holocaust and blah, 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 or
Right,
explains
right, right.
what it means to pass or anything like that. So how do you go about doing that? And how'd you do it with this book in particular?
Oh God. So I feel like the first draft probably looks like that, right? I have all this information, I'm dumping it on the page, but I know that I'm going to have the opportunity to go back several times and start to kind of shear it down. Shear it down. I think the important thing for me is to look at this work as a, a fictional project, right? So I'm taking out anything that sounds academic,
Mm,
or I'm changing it, molding it so it just becomes a natural part of the narrative, and it doesn't feel laborious to the reader, even though they're still being taught. But um yeah, I think it's just shearing and shaping. Just shearing and shaping and making sure that all the information is flowing, that it's balanced, that there's a rhythm, but still you're getting the truth of the historical bits that I've stuck in
mhm,
between, the fictional parts. I
mhm.
think that's the most fun for me too. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that I can, play with reality in that way.
Mhm, mhm. Bedtime and
Yeah,
insert
all of that.
people, real historical people. And I think, readers appreciate that also. It's like, oh, oh, there's, Bessie Smith and
Right,
here's,
right.
so and so, oh, I remember them. And
Mhm,
it anchors the work in a way that other forms don't necessarily are not necessarily able to do,
mhm,
because people can come back and say, "Oh, yeah, that is true, isn't it?" So maybe there's even some more truth in this made up part of the story.
mhm,
I
mhm.
believe what she's telling me.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, so you have this body of work, and it's all been fiction, and you do essays as well. But
Yes.
now you've moved into another realm, which terrifies me as a writer, which is the memoir. And so can you just sort of like briefly talk about why and how? How did you get to a space where you felt like, this is what I want to do next in my writing?
So, I think it happened my interest in creative nonfiction came about when I started teaching
Mhm.
creative writing at Tulane University. So, in the early years, I just had, like, introduction to creative writing, and in that course, I had to teach fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh my god, how am I gonna do this?" But then I started reading these collections of essays, and I said, "Wow, this reads like fiction because these authors are using all of the same techniques that we use
Mhm.
in fiction.
Right.
It's just they're just writing about something that is true." And I
Mhm.
was like, "Well, I kind of been doing this, writing about true things, right?
Right.
Under the veil of fiction." And I liked all of the different forms. Like there's this umbrella term that's used called the lyric essay.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, I love this. This speaks to me so much." So over the years, because it's going to be 8 years since I've been at Tulane, and I've just really gone down the rabbit hole of creative nonfiction. And I felt like this is something that I wanted to start doing. So I started with, just doing short pieces and publishing short pieces, and they were well accepted. And I was like, well, maybe I should write a memoir because as you well know, I'm very concerned with legacy.
Mhm.
Um, I don't ever want my descendants to be scrambling around trying to find information about me or the relatives who raised me whom they don't know. And I
Mhm.
wanted it all in one place, but also with this memoir, I was looking at America
Mhm.
and, I'm quite interested in patterns and looping. And that phrase same-ish, different day. That's that's what my memoir is about. Like this, there's nothing new under the sun. If you think it's new, it's not. And
Mhm.
so I'm fascinated with connections. So that's why I decided to write the memoir. I'm writing about me, but less so about me, just me living um through history and how my life and those incidents affected my writing, still affect my writing.
Mhm. Mhm. So, and that's called Firstborn Girls, yes?
Firstborn Girls, coming out in 2025.
Yay, so we can look forward to that. So that's so exciting. So I'm gonna find out all kinds of stuff about you then. So, just to sort of give everyone, the viewers and the listeners a little bit of backdrop and context as to when all of this is taking place. Both Bernice and I are at a writing retreat fellowship in Chestertown, Maryland. And we are surrounded by the wealth and breadth and intelligence and humor of 7 amazing writers. Um, and it is what has fed us beyond the wonderful food, but it has fed us in a way that is so very much needed by writers in general. And Bernice is also going to be a part of the 17th annual National Black Writers Conference, where she is going to be honored with the Toni Morrison Award. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about, in the conversations that we've had this past week, your experiences out in the world, why um, places like where we are, and why something like the National Black Writers Conference is so important to Black writers and to Black literature.
So, like you said, we are here at in Chestertown, Maryland, at a place called the Oak Manor, and this is a writer's residency for Black women, the first of its kind, and that sounds crazy, right? I've been to other residencies, and it's majority white. That is the truth. Um, and I've had a lot of interesting conversations. I've gotten a lot of writing done, but there is something magical that happens when an artist, a female artist, is able, a Black female artist is able to be in a space with other Black women, writers, musician, whatever that artistry may be. It's safe, completely safe, right? It's a completely safe space. And that alone makes a world of difference. So we Donna and I both realize how blessed we are to be here, and we're very, very grateful. And I just like to say we need more of these spaces. Um, with the award
And the
and the celebration
Mhm.
of not just myself, but they've been doing this for how many years now? How many years has it been?
17.
17 years. Um, Again, we do have other organizations that celebrate Black writers, but we don't have enough, which makes the organizations that we do have very, very special. We hold those organizations dear and near to our hearts because we know how lucky we are to have people who care about us,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And people who are organizations who are supporting us. It's so important. It's we would write whether we had that or not, because that's just what we do. But to feel appreciated,
Yeah.
to feel loved, to
Mm,
feel nourished,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's a
very
whole
important.
different experience.
It's yeah,
Yeah,
it's a whole different thing. And one of the conversations that we've had here is about Black writers seeking approval, acknowledgement, and accolades from institutions that weren't created with us in mind,
yeah, yeah.
right? We're knocking our heads up against the wall because we didn't get the Pulitzer and the National Book Award. Meanwhile, our people are loving on us.
Mhm. Yep.
And so the question is, why isn't that enough?
Mhm.
But it I had my battles with that, but it's enough. I was like, this is it. Like this is the sweet spot.
Yeah,
This is the
yeah,
sweet spot. So I'm extremely grateful.
yeah, me too. I'm glad I'm here. So, of course, we could talk forever.
Yes.
I have so many things that we could talk about. But I just want to thank you for, taking time out of your writing, which is why you're here, to talk with me and, share yourself with the audience. I just want to remind everyone that Bernice will be at the National Black Writers Conference at Medgar Evers College, and she will be honored along with Percival Everett, Who else is going to be up? A couple other people. Anyway, a bunch of folks.
A
Four,
bunch
four
of great
honorees.
folks.
Yes. And you can find out more about the conference by going to centerforblackLiterature.org. The conference is free and open to the public. It is a 4-day event. I do hope that you'll tell a friend and you'll bring 2 friends and enjoy what we have to offer. The lineup of authors are phenomenal. In addition to Bernice being an honoree during the National Black Writers Conference, she will also be a guest for our students on February 14th, virtually, because her book, The Book of Harlan, was also selected as Medgar Evers College's Big Read. And so that's something that we do each year. We honor a variety of authors. And so the Book of Harlan will be on the February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. So we have to make sure we give her a lot of love.
Love
So
it.
I want to thank you again, Bernice. Thank you all for joining us. Again, I'm sitting in for Dr. Brenda Greene. I'm Donna Hill, an assistant professor here at Medgar Evers College. And thank you. Writers on Writing happens every Sunday, so we hope that you will turn in, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.